Greetings, this is Karen, Naturally with Karen, and I've got a live stream today about distractions and layers. These are medicine that I'm uploading to YouTube, and as I told my son Zawa, this particular medicine I'm uploading for him, but I'm also uploading it for everyone. None of us knows, the future. We don't have there goes little Pablo, a little crystal ball that tells us all of the answers as intuitive or psychic or knowing that we are. So as we get ready to get started here, I thought I would talk about something briefly when it comes to distractions and the layers and how other forms of medicine, bless up, good to see you guys, other forms of medicine really look to solving the problem that today is called disease, okay? I had a really good cry, what you would call this morning, this rise. And I put on a couple of songs that have special meaning, just like I'm sure you have songs that have special meaning. And our crying is a way that we allow things that have influenced us to come out. Just like we eat food, right? And we use it as a form of locomotion, like putting gas in the car. So every woman's face is the clay, which represents the experiences that she's gone through. It's not easy raising children in the world today. It's not easy being a healer, a worker, an architect, an accountant, mechanic. Anything that you do has a lot of stress with it. And then you've got to go chase money and you've got to figure out all of the different layers. And that's what this video is about. This video is about all the different layers that I alluded to very briefly in the Bioengineered Child on the Toxic Brain series. So if you haven't watched that, I know it's a really long one, but consider it a gift instead of a burden. If it's too long for you, just don't watch it. Before we get started, here is a picture of my face when I'm about 32 years old. Okay, I've got braids, and you can see that I look really different than I do right now. And here is a picture of me at a little over 4 years old, right? You can see it's still me. And why am I showing you that? Well, not because I'm self-centered, egotistical, or narcissistic. Here's a picture of my son when he is, about a toddler age here. In fact, he's at the Santa Cruz Waldorf because we were envisioning him going to school at Santa Cruz Waldorf, where he ended up working. So you can see he's a little cutie there. That's Zawa. I only have one child, and I would have had a whole bunch if I could have, because I just love children, and I hope to be able to adopt one day when the center is established and we're growing food and we can really be a model worthy of imitation, which is what people often go to church for on Sunday, is to celebrate Jesus, or to go to their temples or mosques or whatever it is, to celebrate someone who they consider to be an ascended master who's walked the earth at one time, or who allegedly walked the earth at one time. Okay. And before we really kind of get into the fruit instead of the meat of the discussion, I want to share with you, if you've never seen what real nutmeg looks like, this is what it looks like. And you can see that I've been kind of grating it. Okay. So for a lot of folks, I know it was new to me at one time, this is what a little nutmeg looks like. So if you go to the spice aisle at Whole Foods or somewhere, instead of always buying the ground nutmeg, you can buy yourself several nutmegs. And I want to give a shout out and a thank you to Zuri Sage for sending me the nutmeg and also the organic heirloom squash seeds. I planted 3 varieties of the squash seeds that she sent me from Washington. I really appreciate that. So on my stove is some Irish moss, and it's cooking up, and I'm going to put it into a form that I like to use, especially as we're approaching summer here this month. And then I've got my grater, and I just want to show you that on the grater, there's the side over, why do I always get the webcam? There's the grater over here with the side that is really fine. And you would take and, like I have, and grate your nutmeg on the side that's really fine, Okay. So that's kind of like just a little bit of interesting is what ends up happening to us in our lives. It's physical, it's energetic, it's emotional, and emotions are interpreted by the brain on a cognitive level. They become feelings, okay? So we can't hide our emotions from our face. Through several of my YouTube videos, I've been very candid about the fact that a close family member struggled with heroin and fentanyl addiction and went from snorting to smoking to injecting. A lot of overdosing and a lot of me not sleeping, not taking my supplements, not really taking as good of care of myself. So I want you to notice that like my skin is starting to get that glow to it again, including even up here, right? Some of the extra weight that was on my arms and so forth, I'm doing a lot of scrubbing and my supplements. It's kind of pulling my hair back, but it's getting shiny and it's, you know, it's getting a nice curl to it. So regeneration is a step-by-step daily process. All right, so getting into it, distractions are in this order. I only put 3 because these are the 3 major ones. Food, okay? Since you are being, you're not able to get the minerals, the trace elements, and run your spark plugs as you need to, the food is a #1 drug. So if you go into Walmart, Super One, Albertsons, Safeway, whatever's around you. I'm a native Californian of 42 years, and I now live in Northeast Minnesota. So a Super One, and we had a Safeway back home. We had an Albertsons growing up. And we had Bread of Life and Staff of Life and New Leaf out in Santa Cruz, where, that's my home, and my heart forever home is Santa Cruz, right? Westcliff Drive. I lived on King Street. Food is now a drug. So whether you go into Whole Foods, New Leaf, Safeway, or wherever it is, there's boxes of crackers and there's, packaged, pre-made polentas and all those things. And are there gradations? There's grades of how processed and denatured? Absolutely, because you want to go more for the whole foods. But the 3 distractions are in this order: your food, your phone, and drugs, okay? And drugs are not only the illegal drugs like the heroin and fentanyl I just shared about briefly, but it's also the gabapentin. It's also the OxyContin. It's also all of these things which may be legit helping you right now, but they also might be hindering you. So the food is a distraction because as I'm sitting here writing, I'm thinking, God, it'd be really great to have a chocolate and ice cream. And I start making a deal with myself. When I was raising my son, I showed you his picture. If you're joining me later, this is a picture when he's at Santa Cruz Waldorf School before he's a student there. And so I start making deals with ourselves. But then if I go get that, then the chocolate will give me the caffeine that's naturally in the cacao, and it's going to help me to be able to write my book faster. I'm going to be able to focus better. And it's healthy because it's an ice cream. It's not dairy, right? I'm just going to run to the store and get the organic dark chocolate peanut butter cups because peanut butter is protein. It's organic. It's only $2.49, and it's going to make me feel really good. I'm going to get inspired by doing it. So we make deals all the time. So food is a drug. It's a distraction. And is it something that we need? Well, perhaps it is, right? Perhaps we're all under a type of a system right now where the water and the air and everything is not what it once was. So now we're taking in calories in the form of food to make and produce at least the appearance of energy. So in other words, since we're digesting and pooping, digesting, chewing, digesting, and pooping, chewing, digesting, and pooping, it's been equated with moving and going and thinking and energy. But was it always? I'm not quite so sure about that. The phone, if you see a lot of younger people like I do, it's constantly on the phone, constantly scrolling on the phone and looking at the phone and reading the phone. It's almost like you'd see a business person who's really on task on something. They're doing something super important, but they're on the phone, okay? The drugs, like I said, the Gabbies, the Oxys, the Vicodins, the antidepressants that people are really trapped up into right now that affect the frontal lobes, the frontal cortex, and they start to ban that and shut that down, start to create a world of people that are very different. So those are the distractions, okay? Now, if a baby is, born and mama is distracted, or mama's not well, or mama has to go to work all the time and she works 2 or 3 jobs, baby is likely going to have to figure out how to self-soothe if it's not with a really top-notch caregiver, right? That's holding baby and taking care of baby and soothing baby. I just realized my hair looks really funky. I just washed it. So if you can't self-soothe, and more of us were placed into stranger care, so we had attachment issues. I wasn't, but by necessity, by default, my plan was not that, but by default, it almost just killed me. My son was, and it was really, really, really difficult. And so it hurt me, it hurt him, right? I don't know what goes on all day long. It certainly wasn't the same thing as focusing one-on-one on a baby, or one-on-two if you've got twins or triplets. Like, you're focusing intently with a lot of love and energy and attention, with the etheric connection of mother and child that Steiner talks about, that is going and lasting from 0 to 3, meaning from birth or from in utero to age 3. So self-soothing is now something that is part of my gathering process. Although I don't call it that, I don't just write it down in a notebook as I'm taking notes, with my clients, but I'm sitting here and fastidiously taking some notes as I listen to the words you choose, to your body language, to the symptoms that you have, to what you've given me on your wellness form at Naturally with Karen under consults is a wellness form that you fill out. You click submit, okay? For hundreds of years, soothing baby, soothing mama was not happening, because, even as my grandmother said, don't spoil that baby. You let him sit in that crib or sit in that playpen or whatever it is. So you let him do this, and you never let him, because I had a boy, right? You don't spoil him. And I had to say, Grandma, with all due respect, you're my elder and I respect you, but you cannot possibly spoil a baby, right? And this is where the hurt and the harm of the woman, I could write 3 books on the wounded daughter, from cold mother, from disconnected mother, from disengaged mother, disempowered mother. But take for a moment, take it under your wing, or my mother would say, take it under your craw for a moment. That if for hundreds of years mama was told, don't spoil that baby, you go put him down and you get back to work. But not only that, she was also taught something equally destructive and damaging, which was, you better keep your husband happy, which meant what? You better cook, clean, bear his children. And I'm not a male basher, and I'm not a modern day feminist. I'm an actual real feminist, but I'm not a modern day feminist. Not what I see today. I don't even want to be put in that category. I just could not possibly relate to that, because way, way, way back in the day, I was reading from real feminists, right? I went to real Akasha and many of the Asata and many of the different folks that I was privileged to be around in the Bay Area in California, right? Were, I can't think of the name of her book now. But anyway, a wonderful author that wrote about true feminism, which just means simply empowering the divine, sacred, beautiful, blessed feminine, the iron, that used to make sure that the pack was entirely loved and safe and secure and taken care of. Not because she had to go out there and be a warrior and beat everybody down. No, because she knew how to keep the balance. It's kind of like I can keep a certain tone even with bringing a 5th dog in that was standing out in my yard last night when long after I wanted to go to sleep. I made my live stream a little longer than I planned. And because I wanted the bioengineered child to go from, preconception to young adult, I wanted to have a contiguous flow in terms of, why the bioengineered child, is happening and who he or she is, what it means for us. So self-soothing, when we talk about distractions and layers in this video, distractions is what you should be writing down, and layers. Distractions are in the order I gave you: food, phone, and drugs. The layers are related to your inability now to self-soothe. Because if you could self-soothe, you would say, I'm perfectly fine going out and taking a walk in nature like I did this morning, or this rise. Sometimes you may not understand this rise means the same thing as you may normally say this morning. Okay. So I went out this morning and I took a nice walk, 4 dogs and 2 humans, 6 of us in the pack, thinking about my other pack member who's away from the home right now, and sending love and prayers. And I'm connecting with the solar energy. I'm connecting with the start of the day. I'm noticing crow. I'm noticing the geese above me. I'm noticing the flowers that are blooming, the lilacs that are abundant. I'm outside smelling the perfume of the air that's still spring. Okay. But if you cannot self-soothe, and I was born in 1961, I was home with my mother. Okay. If I can't self-soothe, if I've got this nervous, frenetic, F-R-E-N-E-T-I-C, frenetic energy, I'm just, even if I don't look like I'm shaking on the outside, like you see all the folks around you starting to have these tremors, most of them are being caused by the myelination erosion, and the rest are being caused by the administration of the third distraction, which is drugs. They may be legalized drugs that are handed out in pharmacies, but they're drugs. And you don't know all the ramifications, the bad things that can happen to you by taking them. Okay? The layers are related to your lack of being able to self-soothe. Okay? So when I was speaking with a doctor on Friday at Duluth Family Medical Clinic for an hour in the room, and I said, I am a medicine woman, very different than allopathy. I am original medicine, meaning before we put people in to drink contrast solutions that are poisonous and into a magnet scanning machine, we sensed with this, no hocus pocus, no channeling, no hoodoos, none of that, no offense. But we knew our power. If you can't self-soothe, layers upon layers upon layers are going to be built. So for all the mamas that instilled the fallacy of privilege and handed this over to their sons and daughters, this is my dirty phone, let me wipe it off, handed this to their sons and daughters, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and they're holding a cell phone. They're getting onto YouTube. They're getting onto Facebook. They're learning the intrigue of dopamine hits. That shunts the self-soothing of going out into nature, because they're always going to return to that. They're always. You cannot change that now, because that, by design, just like if you watch, and I've learned, if you watch my Toxic Brain Addiction series, I think that's 4 or 5 on YouTube, you're going to find out that addiction is by design. So this is a device. The system knows what the device or the transition is going to be over the next 150 to 200 years, but you don't know. The most of you don't know. So right now your child is developing patterns, okay? So you handed them privilege with a phone, which is now self-soothing them, okay? because of their heart murmurs, their big-headedness with the large head circumference, their thyroid dysfunction, their wheat paste patches on their skin, and everything else. They were not able to fully soothe themselves. And so what ends up happening, my hair is so funky, just bypass my hair, okay? It's curly and it's regenerating. And you'll see it along the road. It's just real. They can't self-soothe because you put phones, Game Boys, Xbox, PlayStation, virtual reality, and all of these things that you did because you wanted to give them what you believed was privilege. And for many people, you wanted to entertain them because you're a solo parent or you're a grandparent and you don't have the time. And they've already got layers of trauma and they cannot self-soothe, so they can be entertained and occupied on a device. Okay, so while they're occupied on a device, now they're going further and further and further into the layers because it's not being addressed, it's not being observed, it's actually being stuffed through food, phone, and drugs. So when our children go in and they're given, Seroquel, Klonopin, antidepressants like, they're even, and a lot of people are giving lorazepam and all those different drugs. Domestication has hurt us, which means we have started to interpret ourselves as being like a machine that is broken, okay? We have been funneled into, and I mean funneled, meaning, okay, you go over here and you go to the doctor to get yourself treated singularly instead of you go over here and someone helps you to understand why you have the first 3 layers and then the next 3 layers and then the next 3 layers on top of that. So I can't tell you how many times someone comes and says, my father or my grandfather or my friend has Parkinson's disease. What should he take for that? What should he eat for that? And I go, it's not like that. In fact, it's so totally different. What it is that I need to look at what the layers are, which means, yes, I get it. I don't get 6 months of every single day for most people to say, let me figure this out. Let me hear your words and take notes and carefully go through the digesting of you and your journey so I can really understand you. This is what I would do in an optimum situation where just a few of our people had Parkinson's disease. But now, thanks to the wheat and the dairy and the meat and the drugging and the attachment disorders and the vaccinations and the trauma and the stress and the need for dopamine hits, and I could keep going and going and going and going and going. My fastest route is to do it the way I ask, which is order the combination of the hair test and the 30-minute consult, or just order the hair test, let's get it back, and I'll let you know on a real honest level if I recommend that you should do the 45-minute consult, because maybe it's more involved. You might want a full 45 minutes so we can talk about your diet for a few moments, and then it goes from there. And you decide how long you want to keep it going. Okay? We are influenced by every drug that we've ever taken, by every drug that mama was taking before she was pregnant, while she was pregnant, after she was pregnant and breastfeeding us. If she was deficient in certain nutrients and many of her trace elements, you're going to see Down syndrome, autism, heart murmurs. You're going to see all these things that I'm going to be speaking about very, very soon in my book, but you're going to buy that because I'm not going to hand that to you for free anymore. That's just how I've become. So I got to float my boat too. Okay. So because of this conversation that I had with this doctor, and I just love him dearly. In fact, I think he's going to become my physician of record, my primary care physician, because if, in today's world, if you have an accident on the road or something happens to you, you really need to know that you've got someone on record that you can remotely trust as a doctor that's going to kind of oversee. So, I just laid it out in a really super nice way. And I said, don't do mammograms, don't do colonoscopies, don't do vaccinations, don't do medications, don't do anti-life pills. I didn't say it like that, but I'm giving you guys the super fast scoop, okay? So as I touched on in the bioengineered child, and a lot of people won't get around to watching an hour and 20-minute video that has a huge give in it, I basically said that if I have a child that mom already had a toxic womb, nobody wants to think of themselves of having the toxic womb. I mean, it doesn't even sound good. So let's just say mom had toxicity. Mom, bless up, Sabrina. Mom had toxicities. So she wasn't really in the best space to be having children, okay? And mom's mineral levels weren't really up. Well, most of you have already had your children, and you actually had no real idea whether or not you were sufficient or deficient, okay? When I showed you my picture here, this is 2 years before I had my son. I was at this point starting to clean my womb. I was a vegetarian. Here's a picture of my son. He came out perfectly healthy and wonderful, okay? Here he is at Santa Cruz Waldorf School. What you see with us elders today is that we've seen a lot. Some of us have seen too much. I've had Native American Indian clients back in 2004 that were in their 70s when I was 43, 44 years old, giving them body work and energy while they and I cried together as they opened up and poured out the stories of their children, their childhood being removed and by the hair and their hair cut, and then being told they would be severely punished, maybe even dunked in the water if they spoke Anishinaabe Ojibwe language. I live a mile away from an American Indian reservation called Fond du Lac. And over the last 16 plus years, in February it will be 17 years, I have been a shaman and a medicine woman to hundreds of people. I've got their client sheets, the wellness forms that I now have people do online, in a huge box, a tote. I have cried with a great number of people. Betty Sorella was a local client who developed small cell cancer, and for the last 6 months of her life, she was a head night shift nurse. She came to me and she said, I'm not going to get this kind of nurture from my husband, my grandson, or anybody else in my world. And I'm doing this for me because small cell is a virulent form of cancer. I'm going to die. I don't want to do the wellness route. I know from being a nurse that I'll be dead within 6 months to a year tops, probably 6 months. And I want you to take care of me and help me transition to my end. I was 44 years old. I had been helping people on what I called my apprenticeship for about 20 years and never charging a dime. I earned my money through being an independent family law paralegal, working in a law firm for 10 years, working directly for the DA, having an office and a contract with the judges in Santa Cruz County. And I had coached people for free, or they would trade me or bring some food, or they would make a donation. But I wasn't saying, hey, you got to pay me $125 for a 45-minute session. And I don't do that with a great many people that I can afford to take on, depending on what's going on in my life, if we can make a trade. But the system is set up very differently so that most of us totally abandoned seeking, as I did for 35 years, because either A, they were laughed out by the medical community, they were told they were charlatans, or they themselves went through such a rocky road and they could not possibly fund paying for their shelter, their food, the dogs, the life, the insurances. And they're going to keep adding. Like I've said in other live streams, it's a matter of time before you're going to pay to park to go get your groceries at the grocery store. Now you're paying for the shopping cart to borrow it and put it back. You're bringing your own bags, and all these are great, don't get me wrong. But it's a training of people. I got a little ginger and licorice root tea. I'm going to take a sip here. I'm putting my medicine out in increments and I'm giving about 10%. So if you're a client and you come on board, what I offer you is something unique and personal, just designed for you, and a plan of an order of operations under a plan. The plan is changing all the time if it needs to, because we're adjusting based on what's working, what's not working, kind of a thing. So while that might sound really flaky, it means that it might be that you're doing something for about 3 or 4 weeks. And now we say, okay, let's start introducing this and start turning this around. And now maybe 6 months later, we're doing a retest on your hair tissue mineral analysis to see if what we've done has worked. Or I might say, why don't you go to the doctor and get these blood tests done, because I know from experience looking at those particular tests that I'm going to be able to determine something. Okay. So what else did I want to say here? Okay. So as far as the doctor and the layers, if a child comes in and there's already been a slight birth trauma, a cesarean section, a forceps, which has happened, for many, many years, for many, many children, right? If social workers have removed the child from the home, if the child had a very traumatic early exit from the home, going into infant care, toddler care, daycare, even if you think your child's like, oh my God, he loves going there, he just loves it, I mean, you can't believe it. Well, remember, the child is going with the flow with what you want. Oftentimes the child's going to pick up on it also. If mom, like in my case, I was like, oh my God, I can't believe it. I was sitting in my car thinking I was going to have a nervous breakdown before I got in to do my work, and then to do my work all day and have the desk clean and run out the door the moment I could possibly run out the door exhausted me, and my adrenals were already exhausted. So could I go to a doctor at that point where I was weepy, I was exhausted? What could they do for me? They could send me to an endocrinologist, which is about an $800 visit, and they could test all my blood. They could tell me whether or not I had a thyroid problem. They could ultrasound my yoni, my uterus. They could tell me if I had cyst on my ovary, and then they could hand me a diabetes medication called metformin. Are you starting to get the picture? Because the picture is that we have layers upon layers upon layers built upon missing mother, distractions, missing the ability to learn how to self-soothe, and now having technology seduce to reduce us even more. So technology has brought us amazing things, but what you don't see is their timeline in this linear. It's a very linear, L-I-N-E-A-R, linear, comes from the root word align, timeline, birth, death, right? Young, old. It's a very dualistic kind of thinking. You're one or the other. You have time or you don't. There's good and there's evil. So right now we are trapped under the confluence of duality. Is it necessary? I don't know for sure. But if our people are more and more unable to self-discipline and come into positive daily habits and stay with those habits, because the food drugs are so enticing, you're thinking, you're making deals, right? I can just get that because I've been eating plant-based for the last couple of weeks. It's okay. Which is why I have my Irish moss on the stove, which is how we started, right? This is a grater, and it's one of many. I've got several graters actually, and you can see there's a side on it that's really, really small right here, okay? See the super small side. And here is the nutmeg that Zuri sent me along with the heirloom organic squash seeds, okay? And you can see I've been grating this nutmeg. Don't go too buck wild on the nutmeg, because too much nutmeg is a bad thing. It's not good. Go sparingly. So what I'm doing, I'm going to give you a little tip that you're not probably going to find elsewhere, because you should be able to get onto my live streams on YouTube or Facebook and say, Hey, cool. I got something from an elder, shaman, medicine person who maybe I didn't know. My hibiscus, jamaica, rosehip with the zest, ice cubes that I put into the coolers that I put. And as you can see, I started with my skin is starting to glow again, my décolleté, right? My hair is starting to glow. It's getting bleached by the sun because I love to get out in the sun and I know it's so good for me. But you're going to take your little nutmeg and you are going to grate it on the smallest side, just like this, right? And it's going to fall. And then what I did with it, that's the tip, is I put it in my Irish moss that's cooking and I add my bladderwrack in there. And then I can take that off the stove here in a little bit because it's on a super, super, super low heat after I bring it to a boil. And I'll be able to pull the plants out and I'll be able to put the plants into a broth that I make later for the dogs so they can start healing. So I'm not sure if you really, if this was as crystal clear as I really wanted it to be, but there are layers and there's distractions. And the three top distractions in this order are food, phone, and drugs. And they've got our 30 and under folks, our family, our pack, our world family. 30 and under are heavily, heavily, heavily trapped under seeking self-soothing and dopamine hits and love through their phone, on social media, on games, on Reddit, on, not that Reddit's a bad thing, it's a great thing. Social media can be a great thing. It's great to connect with people, but we don't get that oxytocin flowing that we would if we were together in person. Together in person, we would be taking care of the babies. We would be healing everyone together because we'd be out in the sunshine, we'd be packing up together, we'd be walking, we'd be taking care of the sprouting seeds, the food that's growing, the compost, the worm bin, the dogs over here that we can kind of share some of our extra food so they can be with their own families and not living in our homes like we're doing now. It's very unnatural and it's too compromising. A dog doesn't want to sit and sit and sit and sit all day long in your sticks and bricks. Even in my situation, getting them out for an hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours a day and running in the car with me, that's not their life. And people start to feel a certain way when I say the dogs do not love you and they don't actually want to live with you, but they're stuck with you. They're stuck with you. The last thing I'm going to say before I let go and say so long on this live stream is that every woman's face, every man's face is a roadmap. This is your earth and clay. This body is your earth and clay, okay? If I show you my picture, okay, here, okay, my little girl picture, okay, and I show you this picture here in, my 30s. So this is almost 30 years ago because I'm about 31 here, okay. And you see my face today, and I tell you that for a year I went through at least a dozen life-changing, life-threatening, life or death overdoses. Not sleeping but an hour to 2 hours, extreme worry for a year. Then you understand why people become inflamed, swollen, why they start getting short-tempered, short fuses, because their cortisol levels in the doctor's world, their inflammation, their stress hormones, cortisol is a stress hormone, are circulating in their body in fight or flight response. So adrenals that are tapped out on the majority of Americans and people in the world, the majority, are already exhausted on just about everyone. So you could be in top, like the videos you might check out, the hysterical uterus in June of 2017. I'm at Battle Creek Dog Park, glowing, beautiful popping dreadlocks, nice and thin belly. Arms were not, as thick as they are right now. Feeling good. But if you degenerate, you can regenerate. As long as you can get away from the stress, whatever it is, you can get to sleep. You can apply the things that I'm doing right now, right? The Irish moss, the vitamin C, all the different things that I'm doing, and you can regenerate yourself. And your eyes and your face, the roadmap of your experiences can start to become different. Your hair can, lose the gray. You can tan again instead of burn, right? I started to actually even, start to get a little extra red on my beak here because I've got one of those Caucasian beaks that sticks out really far, where usually I would just tan and bronze really super easy. But if you get those stress hormones flowing through you, or you're on a lot of medications and you're in a white skin bag, you're going to go outside and you're going to burn. That's the first thing you're going to do. So I didn't burn in the past. I had a lot of keratin flowing in my skin. And I'm really excited because I'm in Northeast Minnesota, and the way the trees are blowing and the way the weather shifted from the bright sun this rise, we're going to have probably a really big thunderstorm, and it's going to be really exceptional. So let me look at your being subject. Yeah. Okay. So the point was, bless up Zohar, Sabrina, Amber Stevens, who else here? Willie Williams, Steve joins quite a bit. We told women for a long time, because if you read Merlin Stone and Rianne Eisler, you'll find out that women were taken out of a place of great power. And with that great power, we had great respect for the people, for the earth, for the animals, for all the beings, no matter if they had fins, feather, fur, or fluff. They were all respected equally. We spoke with tree. I was raised, that's what you do, right? I mean, you do that. It's just natural. I was raised to think about the omens outside that we call symbols, or that James Redfield wrote I read his entire series of books, the Celestine Prophecy, all the way to the different insights, and the Celestine Prophecy workbook. And I got the Celestine Prophecy, the Song of Celestine book for my son when he was very little. Just like I got Sirius the Dog Star, which was an exceptional book because it really opened my eyes, and the Velveteen Rabbit, and many different stories. So we choose today, we choose to start making different choices, to start healing ourselves, or we keep treating. We keep treating and drugging and cutting it out. And 90% of the time, that is not the answer. That is not going to find the root cause. It's not going to heal you. Healing you is going to take time. It's going to take work. It may or may not work. If you've waited too long, it may not work, but we'll give it our best shot. So our best shot, our best efforts is what I should have said, our best efforts. Okay, so thank you for joining me, and have a wonderful day. So long.